Before Khabib Nurmagomedov became an undefeated UFC champion, he lived a life most fighters wouldn't even survive. His story isn't just about wins inside the octagon, it's about survival, sacrifice, and the kind of discipline that breaks most people before they even begin. One story sums it up perfectly. As a child, Khabib wrestled a bear. Not a metaphor, not a rumor. Actual footage shows a young boy grappling with a chained bear in the snow. Was it really training? Or was it just his father's way of teaching him fearlessness? Either way, that moment captured exactly what Khabib's life was all about, turning impossible challenges into everyday lessons. And behind it all was his father, Abdul Manap, the man who shaped him into both a fighter and a soldier of discipline. But the mountains of Dagestan weren't a playground, they were a battlefield. Khabib was born in 1988 in the harsh, mountainous region of Dagestan, Russia. Life there was far from ordinary. Poverty was everywhere. Violence wasn't a rare event, it was a backdrop to daily life. Wars and conflicts had torn through the region for decades. For children in Dagestan, survival wasn't guaranteed. In that environment, weakness wasn't an option. Families had to be tough, and young boys were expected to learn discipline fast. Khabib's father, Abdul Manap, wasn't just a parent, he was a military veteran and a highly respected coach. His training methods were strict, almost militant. For Khabib, there was no such thing as easy days. From the time he could walk, he was expected to train, obey, and improve. His childhood wasn't like other kids. While most were playing games, Khabib was being molded for combat. His playground wasn't a soccer field, it was a wrestling mat in a small, cold gym. His lessons weren't just about winning fights, they were about never breaking under pressure. And it wasn't long before Abdul Manap put his son through a test that would go viral years later. The footage is shocking. A tiny boy in a winter hat wrestling a full-grown bear cub, its claws scraping at the snow as Khabib grips, pulls, and refuses to quit. To outsiders, it looked insane. But to Abdul Manap, it was simple. If his son could handle a bear, he could handle any man. That wasn't even the hardest part of his training. Khabib ran up mountains until his legs gave out, trained in freezing rivers to build endurance, and wrestled opponents far bigger than him to learn how to fight with pure willpower. There was no luxury gym, no fancy equipment, just old mats, battered gloves, and endless drills. In Dagestan, toughness wasn't optional, it was survival. Khabib quickly gained a reputation in his village as the boy who never quit. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the fastest, but he had something no one could match: unshakable persistence. But Dagestan wasn't the whole world. To become a true champion, Khabib had to leave the mountains behind and prove himself on a bigger stage. In 2008, at just 20 years old, Khabib made his professional MMA debut. These weren't glamorous fights under bright lights. They were gritty, small venue battles across Russia and Eastern Europe. Khabib often fought multiple times in the same week, sometimes even back-to-back. He built an undefeated record in silence. Nobody outside his region knew his name. But inside the cage, his relentless style left opponents gasping for air. He wasn't just beating people, he was overwhelming them. His mix of wrestling and sambo turned every fight into a test of survival, and nobody passed. Before long, he was 16-0. And that's when the UFC finally noticed. In 2012, he signed with the world's biggest fight promotion. Few fans had ever heard of him. But they were about to. From his first UFC fight, it was clear Khabib was different. His pressure was relentless, his grappling suffocating. Opponents described it as drowning on dry land. Even the toughest fighters looked helpless once Khabib got them against the cage. Rafael dos Anjos, Michael Johnson, Edson Barboza, all top-tier athletes, all broken under the same crushing style. By the time the fight ended, it wasn't just physical, it was psychological. His opponents weren't just defeated, they were shattered. Fans began to realize that Khabib wasn't just another wrestler from Russia. He was something rare, a fighter who could control every second of a fight and make world-class competitors look like amateurs. But nothing tested him more than his next challenge, the biggest rivalry in UFC history. The fight that changed everything. Khabib versus Conor McGregor in 2018. This wasn't just about fighting, it was personal. McGregor mocked Khabib's faith, insulted his family, and disrespected his homeland. The trash talk was endless. For months, the world watched as the feud grew nastier by the day. When fight night finally arrived, millions tuned in. McGregor was the loudest, most famous star in the UFC. Khabib was the quiet storm, calm, disciplined, unshaken. Inside the octagon, the result wasn't even close. Khabib dominated every round. In the fourth, he locked in a choke, and McGregor tapped. It was a moment of silence after months of noise. But the story didn't end with the tap. Khabib jumped over the cage, leaping into the crowd to confront McGregor's team. Chaos erupted. Fans and fighters rushed in. It became one of the wildest nights in UFC history. For some, it was a scandal. For others, it was proof that Khabib fought with fire that couldn't be contained. But that fight was only the beginning of his reign as champion. After McGregor, Khabib defended his belt against Dustin Poirier. The build-up was respectful, but inside the cage, it was the same story. Khabib's pressure was too much. Poirier later admitted he felt broken by the pace. Next came Justin Gaethje, known for his knockout power and wild fighting style. Many believed Gaethje could finally stop the undefeated champion. Instead, Khabib submitted him with ease. Even Gaethje admitted afterward, "I felt like I couldn't do anything." By this point, Khabib's dominance wasn't just physical, it was mental. His reputation alone made fighters doubt themselves before the first punch was thrown. But behind all the victories, something far more painful was happening in his personal life. In 2020, Khabib's greatest supporter, his father Abdul Manap, passed away due to health complications. For Khabib, it was more than losing a parent. It was losing his mentor, his coach, and the man who had built his career from the very beginning. Before his fight with Justin Gaethje, Khabib made a promise to his mother. He would never fight again without his father in his corner. After submitting Gaethje, Khabib placed his gloves in the octagon and announced his retirement. 29 wins, 0 losses, a record no UFC champion has ever achieved. He walked away at the very top. Even after retiring, Khabib's presence in the sport is unshakable. He now coaches the next generation of fighters, passing on the same discipline and values his father gave him. Fighters trained under him carry that same relentless style. To fans, Khabib isn't just remembered as an undefeated champion. He's remembered as a symbol of discipline, respect, and honor. From the mountains of Dagestan to the bright lights of the UFC, he never betrayed his values, never changed his identity, and never lost his way.